Hi, and welcome to Ion Radio. I'm Ken.
And I'm John.
And we are bringing you another video from our homes during the pandemic. We're going to do a little bit of Star Wars Armada chat. John, what are we doing today?
So we decided to talk about commanders, Imperial Commanders to be specific. So there's 13 of them, so we're going to rank for you what our least favorite, least likely to take commanders are, going up to what our favorite commanders are currently in the game.
So what I wound up doing is very similar. I have my commanders listed out pretty much in the order in which I would choose them. In some cases, I have a few things I might do a little differently. So, for example, one of my lower ranked commanders, there's a couple different fleet lists I would definitely put him in prior to others, and then we'll just kind of go there. But as this goes up, I wouldn't say this is for me what I would choose to be more competitive, but more along the lines of what I'd rather play with.
Okay, that makes sense. That's kind of what I did too. Because even while some commanders may be good, I just don't necessarily like using them. It does kind of scale very well with power levels, but that's not necessarily what I did.
All right, well, let's get started. So I guess with 13 commanders, we can start with commander number 13. John, who's yours?
My number 13 is the Emperor himself, Emperor Palpatine. He has a very limited use by me. I've only used him like once. It is difficult to design a fleet around him because his ability is very, very specific, and he costs a lot of points. So you kind of want to have fighters, and you want to have ships, and you want to be able to do lots of attacks to try to force people to use their tokens on the turns that you spend them. Which isn't really the Imperial way, because of the Imperial way mostly is let's run at least one big ship and then a couple support ships, or no fighters, or just lots of fighters. He costs too much for what he does. Maybe someday someone will figure out how to use him, but it's probably not going to be me because he's going to stay in my binder.
So for me, it's Admiral Constantine is my lowest ranked commander. Principal reason there is you need to have a lot of larger ships. I think it's large and medium ships, right?
Correct.
Medium and large ships, yeah. You need to have a bunch of them, and my immediate thought is to jump to victories or interdictors, and if you don't have pretty much 3 of them on the table, your coverage is going to be fairly limited. And the other thing that I find sometimes run into case, and maybe just because I play against you a lot, John, is adjusting someone's speed by 1 doesn't necessarily help my game play out very much. So that's kind of my take on it. He's relatively inexpensive, which is definitely a good thing. But for certain objectives, I think he would be probably more useful than others. But you're sucking up a lot of fleet points just to get Constantine into the game with those larger ships. That's a personal opinion, though.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, moving on to number 12. This might not surprise anyone. Number 12 for me is General Tagge. It's the same thing as the Emperor. He's very limited in what he does. I think that his ability fires on the wrong turns, because more than likely you're not going to have lost tokens yet on round 3. And it's at the start of round 3, and usually you only have 1 round of shooting, maybe at the end of round 2. He's just too limited. There are other better defensive commanders, and yeah, I just don't like him.
So my number 12 is going to be Ozzel. Ozzel, I think, works very well in probably an MSU fleet. You do a lot of speed jumping. Where I do find he's very useful, and I've had some success with them, is in flying onagers, especially on that opening move to be able to kick an onager up or down some speed. depending on what's going to put you in a better line of sight to take out a transport or a smaller ship, or get that one really good first shot. Maybe it's my play style. I'm not the most maneuverable player, and I like to fly bigger things, ISDs, etc. My opinion just doesn't really work that well. Plus, I also like to fly victories, and when you're dealing with Speed 2 ships, I don't know you're getting the utility out of Ozzel. He is cheap, though, so that's a positive thing.
Yeah. So I will touch base on Ozzel when we eventually get to him, because I have some comments about that.
Fire away. We'll wait till you get there.
Okay, so this is the first one that we've both used for my number 11. It is Admiral Constantine. I wish he was better. I do, but
so do I.
He's not. He doesn't really work. The Imperial bigger ships, medium and above, cost a lot. So you have like medium base ships. You got your Quasar, too squishy to ever really want to use it in someone's face at the range that you need to slow them down. Victories are too slow. Interdictors, there's better commanders to use with an interdictor. And then it doesn't even work with the SSD. I think if it worked with the SSD, then you might have something there.
Yeah, but I think it's specific to medium or large ships, so he's not going to even be useful on the SSD.
Right,
It'd be
but
interesting
I'm saying,
to see him
if
work
the
on that.
SSD is big enough that you could theoretically have other ships around it, it would be easier to get off, but you can't. So that's where he sits. I still think he can have some fun builds. That's why he's not on the bottom. The other ones below him I just don't think are fun. At least he has a little bit of a fun, maybe I can get this janky list to work feel, which is always something that I go for. So that's my number 11.
So my number 11 is Emperor Palpatine. So I ranked him just a little bit higher than you did. I think he might have some utility in a larger battle. I think if we brought a 1,200 point fleet out, I think he might have some kind of play. He's expensive, which is why I think, again, when you get into 1,600 points, you don't notice that nearly as much as a 400 point build. But I haven't really found, like you have, haven't been able to figure out, is where is he really going to be useful? What's going to work with it? I do think there's something to be found. No one's just found it yet, or at least I haven't, you haven't. So I think it's going to be in bigger play.
Yeah. I know that I believe a few people used them at last year's Nova and had moderate success with them. And that was just like an Arca 10 fleet with a bunch of decimators, which that I'm a big fan of that. But it's just too fragile against other very aggressive fleets. Like, it's not very good against Radis, and those fleets aren't also very good against the fleet that won that Nova, which is a very aggressive 5 activation Imperial, we're going to attack you at close range and punch you in the face quickly list. Arca 10s just don't have enough health to withstand that. So you're like doing this skirt around the edge the entire game.
Right.
And the Imperial don't do that very well.
No, they really don't. I mean, the Arca 10s kind of can do that, but you're limiting what your firepower really is when you're circling and only getting one shot per ship.
Yeah. Okay, on to number 10, making our way through this already. My number 10, you've also already mentioned, and that is Admiral Ozzel. He would be an excellent Rebel commander.
Oh, very much so, yes.
He is not a good Imperial commander. When you look at the Imperial ships as a whole, the only ship that really wants this ability is the Raider. Most of the Imperial other ships want to either be going slow or speed 2. You got Victories, speed 2. You got Interdictors, speed 2. You have the Star Destroyer, which, again, just navigate like normal. Quasars either want to go really slow or really fast, and they're commanding squadrons, so you're not going to be using, navigate necessarily. It's the Raiders, and they're too squishy. They just fly in and will immediately die. swarm mechanics in Armada aren't very big right now, and they're especially not very good with the Imperial players. So that's kind of what I had to add to you're talking about it. I think, I know you mentioned that you would use it possibly with an Onager. Why not just take Officer Ozzel with the Onager? You get that one speed bump at the beginning if you need it to get yourself a little bit farther, and then you can spend an Admiral on someone that's actually useful. So
I've actually have used Ozzel as the officer card, and yeah, occasionally that puts you right where you want it. And of course, whenever I need him, he's never on my build.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, so number 10 for me is going to be Admiral Piett. I think the big thing there is he's great on the Super Star Destroyer. But again, for the point cost, there's other admirals we could use, and we'll get to them in a little bit. Really, my principal reason for putting him on something would be cheap commander. I don't think you can get the utility out of him. That's my take for Piett. Interesting commander, solid on a Super Star Destroyer, but I think there's even better commanders than him for that, and we'll touch on that in a minute.
Okay, so my number 9 is copy-paste Admiral Piett. Pretty much all the exact same reasons. Like, I literally have written down. Maybe okay on the Super Star Destroyer, but there are better choices. The one thing I have seen him used for, and I think is pretty good, is the fact that you can use Wolf Yularen. You can put him on a Star Destroyer, and then you have Hondo on another ship. So let's say you choose 2 commands, navigation and squadron. You're a squadron build. You can then take those tokens, and with Wolf Yularen, you can spend the token, get it back, and then get a dial worth of command with it. So he's kind of like a Thrawn in that sense, in a specific build. So if you're playing a squadron build and your ISD was going to be your primary carrier ship, you could do that, and it would work well. It's just a little bit of a point sink. You're taking up an officer slot on 2 ships to get it to work properly, but you are saving a few points from Thrawn, so you can go to bid. So it's kind of a niche place that he fits in. I'd rather just use other commanders, so that's why he's still so low, though.
So mine, and what's funny is we're ranking a lot of our commanders in similar spots, maybe just a couple different ones around. For me, we're on number 9, right? So that would be General Tagge for me. I think it's one of the ones where if you really want to get mileage out of him, it's difficult, because his thing, let's see, specifically it says it started the 3rd and the 5th round. Here's the thing, in a lot of the games we play, by the time the 3rd round comes around, that's where we're starting to get into some serious heavy hitting. So we're not really getting the utility out of his ability then. And in most of our games, by round 5, I may not have many ships left. And usually Tagge is gone at that point.
Yeah.
So, unless I get some serious punching through and I'm losing defense tokens on turn 2, are we really going to get it? And I think you can, there's ways to work around that. Minister Tua, as an example. And get yourself some electronic countermeasures. I don't know. Again, same thing, similar reasons you didn't like him. I can't see a good way to get the utility out of Tagge. And he doesn't do much for squadrons or carriers either.
Yeah, right now he just doesn't do enough. Okay, moving right along to number 8. I might get killed for this, but it's Darth Vader. Darth Darth
Okay,
Vader.
so I'm going to stop you right there. Mine is also Darth Vader.
Oh, beautiful. Let's just both talk about why Darth Vader is at number 8 then. And a lot of it has to do with Officer Vader. Officer Vader is 1 point, and he does pretty much the same thing as Commander Vader, but you just discard a commander or another officer to get him to trigger. So, like, when you're looking at him, Commander Vader mostly was seen on the Simon. So if you put a strategic advisor on the Simon, right, so you can delay the opponent to fly into you, and then, like, turn 3, you're not going to use strategic anymore, so you make a roll, and you're like, oh, that's terrible, toss the strategic advisor because you're never going to use them again, and get to re-roll, and then you don't have to spend your defense token, and then you also get another commander. That seems like a way better deal. Especially because Vader is 36 points.
Yeah, and I find with bringing Vader into a fleet, you're not bringing too many squadrons because he's expensive, and you really want him on fighting ships, so big stuff, Imperial Star Destroyers, maybe the new Onager, but again, you're burning through your defense tokens. So if you're not scoring valuable hits, that's a lot of points that you're burning through and not getting, again, that utility from.
Yeah, I would agree.
And I agree completely. In my notes, I actually have the Officer Vader's the same thing and cheaper.
Yeah. He's just... It made Commander Vader pretty much obsolete. I mean, we have enough Darth Vaders around that you're going to see Darth Vader. So you have Boarding Trooper Vader, you have Officer Vader, you have Fighter
Squadron Vader.
Yeah. So you have, like, a lot of different Vaders. Sadly, Commander Vader's not one that we're going to see commanding many fleets moving forward with Officer Vader around. Which is, oddly enough, he's going to be riding a Gazanti. So. Anything else to add to your number 8?
Not really, because, I mean, pretty much everything that you touched on is the same kind of thing, and I think there's another commander that I think you can get more utility out of that does pretty much the same thing. And we'll get to him in a minute also, I think.
Okay, so number 7 for me is Grand Moff Tarkin. I actually really like Grand Moff Tarkin, and I've actually been thinking about using him in more fleets recently than I have ever been, and that's mainly because of the Onager, and I want tokens. But he costs too much, so he's just very difficult to use, specifically in the Empire, because everything already costs a lot, and then you have to pay more to upgrade it, which costs even more, and then he's sitting at like a bazillion and a half points, and you get a token. So I like him. If he was cheaper, I think he would be way higher on this list.
I think he is the most expensive commander on the Imperial side.
On the Imperial side, yes.
Yeah.
So that's my number 7. I
So
like Tarkin. He's too expensive.
My number 7, we'll get to Tarkin later on my list. I clearly have him rated a little higher. Admiral Screed is my number 7. He doesn't do anything for squadrons. And he really does seem to like the smaller ships, the Demolisher in particular, or the Gladiator, rather.
Let's be honest, no one runs Gladiators without demo.
No one runs. That's true. Hence why it's the Demolisher. I mean, straight out of the Droids cartoon. I think one downside to it is you're trying to get too many things to work right, and he can't always be used the way you want him to. Principally because when you're trying to execute Screed, right? You're spending a die to get that crit. Now, I've tried him recently on some Onager fleets, and either I never get the die I want to spend out, or it's going to cost me, in terms of I already have the crits and it's not really going to be useful. So you really need Screed when you're rolling a lot of black dice. So again, whenever you're running demo, the Onager with the longer range shots, if you've got a couple black dice, you can roll in there. But again, it's kind of niche, and if you're running ordnance experts, do you necessarily need them all the time? it's again, he's a good commander. I like him, but I think there are better commanders to use, at least for the way I play.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And I will add a little bit of that in a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, on to number 6. We are now in the top half of our lists. And number 6 for me is General how do you say that?
Ramadi?
General Ramadi. He's new. I don't have a lot of experience with him, but I like him. He does a big swing. So going from obstructed, losing a dice, to now you get to add a dice. Hey, that's pretty good. And he just works well. So you know those like when you play Architens and you play like a swarm of Architens, I think he would work really well with that, because then you can stack all your Architens.
Yes.
And maybe have something in the front like a demo that's blocking your lead ship's thing, and then you can just fire through all your ships, and you're not losing a dice, you're getting to add another dice. Or with the Onager, like, I think as time goes on, he's going to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of what he does. It's not anything too fancy, and he only costs 20 points.
Yeah, he's really cheap. We'll get to him. I'll talk more when I get to him in my list, and I'll just kind of leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah. So General Rami at number 6 for me.
All right, for me, number 6. Again, we're now in the top half of commanders, so this is where I think in most cases it starts getting a little bit more difficult to choose which commander you want to put into your fleet. For me, it's going to be Moff Jerjerrod. I actually rather like him. I don't use him nearly as much, and I think it's the stigma of taking a damage suffering a damage, which in most cases can be a shield, and you get the extra nav out of it. Architens are great with them. ISDs are awesome, just sheer amount of shields that you can get rid of. The Super Star Destroyer is crazy when you can really turn that large thing with Jerjerrod. So I think he's really useful. 23 points is not very much for a commander at all. And I think he also has some good utility on the victories as well, because again, same thing, they're not the most maneuverable ships, but you've got Jerjerrod that's there to kind of help you out. You get a little bit of relief if you want to try and run more squadrons, and you can choose squadron commands over some navigate ones, and that's, I think, probably a bigger utility to an extent. But again, I think you need a good fleet that's not horribly maneuverable to get the full use out of them, and you need to be able to afford to lose a couple shields here and there.
Yeah.
But that's my number 6 is Moff Jerjerrod.
He's higher on my list, so I'm gonna hold my comments till I get to him. Okay, ready to go to number 5?
Let's go to number 5. Top 5.
Top 5. Coming in at number 5 for me is Admiral Screed. I actually think he's a fun commander to use. But like Ken was saying, you need crit effects, and he works the best on black dice. I've been finding myself using him a lot more recently, especially with Onager idea builds. Like taking the dice control aspect of usually I put now veteran gunners on my Onagers to get reroll the entire thing. So after re-rolling the entire thing, if you have a blank dice on reds or your blacks, as I use, I think it's the test bed the most, you can toss one of those and flip something to either a double hit or flip it to a red critical if you still need one. He only works once per shot, but so does the Onager. So when you really absolutely have to have a crit, Screed's your guy.
Alright, so for me in number 5, I have placed Grand Admiral Thrawn. So I rather like Thrawn. I got really excited when the Chimera came out, and we got Thrawn, and when I first saw the card, my initial thought was, the amount of fun you could have trying to figure out what your opponent is doing to set your dials to kind of combat against that could be absolutely fun. And then there's the whole mind game that I think you could play with that. In actual practice, I find out his utility is not as great as I think it could be, or at least rather that I maybe wanted it to be. And I mean, that just is what it is. Having said that, getting an extra dial is huge. But where I found you kind of lose out is if you have 3-4 ships and each one has, let's say, everything set to navigate, and you've got squadron dials on Thrawn, that's great, because now you get the utility of the navigate and the utility of the squadron command. But let's say you've got different squadrons planned out, or different commands planned out for each one of your ships, depending, and then that kind of blows out where you can't really leverage the full capability of Thrawn. Now that's more my play style and something that I've been changing and adapting, so I truly suspect that, after all this pandemic is over, we start playing Armada again, face to face, Thrawn's probably going to go higher up on my list. And I think that's principally because I've got some interesting ideas that I want to try out with him that would probably work better. I also think Thrawn has a unique ability in a larger fleet, where he's going to be significantly more effective. Let's say 800 points. I mean, that's a lot of extra command dials that are going to be pulled out.
Yes, it is. Thrawn, again, is higher on my list, and I'll talk to him about him when we get there. Okay.
All right, so we're at number 4.
Number 4 is Admiral Motti.
Hey, me too. We tied again.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll just go through it real fast. So what I think he's good for is when you're wanting to run just ships.
Mm-hmm.
So when I start designing a just ship fleet, I have to stop and think to myself, is there a commander that's higher on my list that we're going to get to soon that would be better for this? And most of the time the answer is no. He doesn't cost insanely much, so you can fit more ships and more upgrades into it. And then getting the extra health, a lot of times that will just boost a ship just enough to be able to take another turn. Mm-hmm. Especially like little tiny ships like Gazantes, people forget that they have the health boost.
Right.
So sometimes just throwing a Gazanti out in front of someone and letting them ram it to death, it rams and blocks them in one extra turn. Or now you get to activate it, shoot it with it, or pass a token that's needed, then it rams itself and dies. Like, I just like him. He's usually, well, we're in the top 4, so there's only 3 other commanders that I would default to. And usually for a ship-only fleet, he's my default.
So in my cases with Motti, it's always that get the extra health. And if you're running a fleet of ISDs, that's 9. Let's say you got 3 ISDs in a fleet. That's 9 extra hits that you're going to have to hit. And in most cases, in a lot of our games, you always tend to kill me with, you just needed that structural damage card that popped up, and that kills me. So having 1 extra health is insanely useful, and usually that's on a medium or a large ship, so that's another 2. So you're right, I'm going to get another turn out of a Motti class ship. The downside to Motti, though, which I know has plagued me from time to time, I don't think we have one of these on film, so maybe this would be a fun thing for me to avoid. But when you have a couple ships that are leveraging the fact that Motti's keeping them alive, and then your Motti ship goes down and you lose more than just Motti.
Maybe we could do that as a challenge. I'll knock all your ships down to like whatever the Monty level is, and then try to kill Monty and kill your entire fleet all at once. Yeah, you should build a fleet like that. That sounds like great.
Achievement unlocked on the bottom.
Your opponent hates you. Unlocked.
I think Motti could be fun though with something like interdictors though. Imagine just regaining hull back. It'd be a waste with an interdictor because there's better commanders for interdictors. But I would talk about trying to a tanky ship that's never going to die, and now you've just given it another 2-3 health, well 2 health because they're medium-based ships. They'll last, I think, the whole game in that case.
Yeah.
But then Quasar is another one that it's good to have an extra 2 health on also.
Yes. So he's usually my default, because I usually like running double interdictor lists. He's usually my default double interdictor list just because of the extra health.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, ready to move into the top
number 4
3?
is Motti. Yeah, let's go to the top 3. I'm kind of interested because we have very, very similar commander choices here, so I'm curious to see what your number 3 is. And by the way, I should point out, we don't know. We didn't talk about this until right now, so we're just figuring everything out as we go along. So number 3, John.
Number 3 for me is Moff Jerjerrod. He is the default Super Star Destroyer commander. Mm-hmm. With the Super Star Destroyer having no clicks anywhere in its movement template, this allows you to set your speed at the beginning of the game, run at that speed, and then turn when you need to. That 1 damage doesn't really matter on the Super Star Destroyer because they're probably attacking the front half of your ship, and you got shields for days on the back until they get around you, and this might help you to block them from getting around you. I value navigation maneuverability a lot. I know I've talked about it on our channel before, but a navigate on a large ship versus a concentrate fire on a large ship, the navigate is infinitely more useful. Mm-hmm. Being able to keep your opponent inside your front arc compared to like doing a side arc and letting them get by you is a huge dice swing. So I always use the example of a ISD2. That's 8 dice versus 4 dice. If you took a concentrate fire and get to add 1 dice in, woo! You just lost out on a significant amount of firepower.
Right.
Also, the double click, if you're going fast, you can almost like do complete circles around your opponent and stay out of their arcs. Moff Jerjerrod, when I'm running Super Star Destroyer, he's my commander. If I'm running ships only, no squadrons, like between Motti and him, it's a very difficult choice. So basically why he's a little bit higher up is if I have ISDs, Super Star Destroyers, even Victories, I will take him over Motti because Motti, if the ship can't maneuver and I'm planning on going slow and not maneuvering, I'll take him just for the extra health. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, you can outmaneuver your opponent if you take Moff Jerjerrod. So 2 health if you're not getting fired on doesn't matter. I would rather not get fired on. That's why he's a little bit higher for my non-squadron ship-only fleets.
So that's an interesting point that you brought out about taking a damage to outmaneuver his shot. I never really looked at Jerjerrod that way. So yeah. that might, when we redo this list again in a year or 2 or 3, you might see Jerjerrod bump up a little bit more. So
he dodges arcs fantastically. So.
And again, something I never really thought of again because it's why suffer damage if you don't need to. But yeah, if you can suffer 1 damage and not take 5, I guess that would make a heck of a lot of sense.
Yes, it is.
So my number 3 is Grand Moff Tarkin. There's a couple reasons for this. I don't think he is as useful as some of the other commanders at 400 points. Like John pointed out earlier, 38 points is a lot to spend on a commander. And with Tarkin in particular, if you're a newer player or a very indecisive player, you're going to be able to say, all right, this turn I need this particular token. And you're going to be able to spread them around. And I think if you use, one of the liaison, like defensive liaison or whatnot, you can make changes to what the tokens are and make them more useful. Great for beginner players. I have found success with, you're shaking your head no.
Yeah, I disagree with that. But
all right, well,
continue.
So, okay. We'll get to John's comment in a second. I find some utility with Tarkin in 2 particular cases. Sovereign, just because you can kind of play with them a little bit. you fleet commands in specific. Let's say you get the intensify firepower is one that I tend to use Tarkin with, along with an onager, and I find that having the token ability, a little bit of manipulation, and the fleet commands, Tarkin can become useful. I really truly think there's a build out there that is going to let Tarkin really shine. I haven't found it yet. I really want to, and I'm not sure if that's just a Ken pipe dream or an eventual reality. But I suspect it's a Ken pipe dream, and it's just Ken has it in his head. And I don't know why I'm talking about myself in the third person, but I tend to have this.
Clearly you're crazy because Tarkin you think is a new player thing, so it just goes along with that.
Well, I mean, that could be, so, but I still think there's some build that Tarkin can be useful for. Definitely if we start getting into bigger fleets, again, same thing. Your expensive commanders seem to work better in 8 and 1,200 point fleets, just because you can spread the love around with more. But go ahead, and I'm curious to see your thought on Tarkin.
So the reason why Tarkin is not a good new player commander is the fact that he was the first commander, and no one has come up with lists that have been able to stay with him so far. So as a new player, you are then hampering yourself because there are far better commanders out there that you can centrally build like an entire list around and focus in on learning that aspect of the fleet, while Tarkin is a very expensive commander, and he hands only tokens, and he's very janky, and he's used to make, Rune Goldberg type fleets work.
Yes.
The problem with Rune Goldberg type fleets is they don't work. They don't work competitively, and they don't work. So it is not player friendly. An experienced player could take Tarkin and use all the little tricks and move tokens around and do all this, and maybe that fleet will work. But there are commanders that do more than he does and are cheaper, and you can then...
I 100% agree. there are, in almost every case that I build Tarkin up, or a fleet around Tarkin, I can sit there and say, nah, I'm going to be better off using almost anyone else. And I think the one exception to that might be Tagge. I have difficulty finding fleets that Tagge would work better with. But again, this is a situation for me where I just personally think there's a fleet with my name on it and Tarkin is the commander that I'm going to find a way to work.
Yeah. Okay, ready for our top two?
Top two, let's go.
I've lost track of one of the commanders. I think I know which two you have. Obviously, you know which two I have. But number two for me is Grand Admiral Thrawn. And the reason why Thrawn is up there so high is he's insanely powerful. And you get 3 set command dials that can't be changed and can't be messed with. That is why he's so strong. I use him primarily in fighter fleets because I can just set that entire stack to squadrons. And then every ship in my fleet gets squadrons. So for most Imperial fleets, you end up with a Star Destroyer, a Quasar, or some other carrier. It's a Quasar. And then maybe one other ship, a Gazanti. And being able to give them all squadrons and command all of your squadrons and then have other dials set to your ships is huge. So you can then have navigate across the board so you can maneuver your ships to dodge arcs and stay in your arcs and still command your squadrons, and your ships can't be affected by slicer tools, which are very high on Rebel list in tournament fleets that I've played. So when I run squadrons, if I'm running an ace-heavy specific fleet, I run Thrawn. He also works very well with ships, like just ship-only fleets, because you can use him then as concentrate fire. You just listened to me give a talk about concentrate fire not being the best. But if you're already navigating with all your big ships, an extra dice is an extra dice. So you can go then from 8 dice in the front of your Star Destroyer, add in an additional one, which whatever color you want, up to 9 dice, and you're still maneuvering. I think he's very, very powerful. And so if you could just notice the last two other people I've said, maybe I run ship only with, maybe I run ship only with if it's a Super Star Destroyer. If I'm running ship only and I don't need health and I don't need to maneuver, Thrawn's it. If I'm running squadrons, and we'll get to obviously my number one pick, and I'm running ace heavy or like decimators or something that's not swarm specific blue dice generic fighters, I'm picking Thrawn. And that's my number two.
So my number two is General Ramadi, which is funny that we've also picked the same number one. But let me talk about Ramadi first. So pretty much everything you said I'm going to replicate here, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But the big thing again is that extra red die when you're firing obstructed. It's a 2-die swing, which is huge. Great with Architans. I think you can leverage him with Gazantes for sure, because you can go from nothing to a second hit. ISDs are fun to play with them, especially with the Simoon, with the extra ranges. And then Onagers, which again, when you're firing the specialized weapon, it's just extra dice, and you're taking out small ships on turn 1 or 2 possibly. So again, Ramadi I think has a lot of potential, and it's just anytime you're firing at long range, which since the release of the Onager is something I've kind of started to play with. I just like having the extra dice, and it's worth sacrificing a Gazanti or just piloting yourself around some asteroids to get those obstructed shots.
Yeah. And then depending on even what your objective is, he works if you're playing something. You can just basically put the station right in front of you, and then there's certain objectives that obstacles don't affect you. So if you have asteroids in front of you, who really cares?
Right.
Okay, are we ready to go to our number ones?
Number ones, yes, which, if I'm right, I think you and I both have the exact same commander here.
We do. So, big surprise, Admiral Sloane is my number one commander.
Yeah, mine too.
I've been running Sloane since she came out. I actually was running different fleets with the same idea of Sloane, and then Sloane came out and like, it's cheaper and it's better, we're going to just flip-flop to this. I love running generic TIE fighters. My favorite fighter in the game is the TIE Interceptor, and she works great with generic TIE Interceptors.
Yes, she does.
She is my default Imperial Squadron commander, and as a lot of you know from watching, I love running squadrons, so I think I've brought in Sloane to more tournaments than any other commander. And yeah, she just eats ships. She eats aces. Compared to Rebel matchups, she's a really good matchup against Rebel ace Riken nonsense fleets, because you just burn through all the tokens and then kill them. The first turn you could burn all the tokens, and sometimes that's what I do, is I'll just leave things alive with 1 health, sometimes not intentionally, sometimes intentionally, and then the next turn I will Alpha Strike again, and now you have no tokens, and you're on low health, and I'm going to try to kill as many of your squadrons in 1 turn as possible. And she's great. And then TIE Fighters, one of the things that they're horrible at is attacking ships, because it's only like a 50% chance that you're going to be doing anything. And now your chances of doing anything go way up. I find just because I bring her, I roll more hits with my blue dice because I really want accuracies to get rid of their defense tokens.
Yeah,
and then you get to
the one time you can't roll
criticals. Yeah, exactly. You can re-roll your critical symbols. I think she's phenomenal. She's my go-to default Imperial fleet. She works with aces too, but personally, if I'm running aces, I like running Thrawn. If I'm running generics, I run Sloane all day, and she eats with generics ace swarms of both Imperial and Rebel. So she's my number one. I'll let you talk.
So she's my number one for pretty much the exact same reason, Although what's fascinating is I think she's more my number one based on the number of times I've had to fly up against her again, because I think Sloane is your favorite command. Well, clearly it's your favorite commander, but the number of Sloane fleets I have flown against that you've thrown at me, it's just crazy how quickly the defense tokens get eaten up. And I know one of the combos that occasionally gets thrown in there when you get Jendon and Merrick involved, just for that extra 1-2 punch after the interceptors have come in and stripped you of defense tokens.
Yeah.
And then you just get double tapped with Merrick. And I think that's probably one of the best parts of it. You can almost never miss with your fighter squadrons also. You tear through aces like you mentioned. Sloane works on a Quasar. She works on an ISD. There's not a bad ship for her at all. And then just the sheer number of things that she works with. And it's all the non-rogue ships, right?
Correct.
So you're
Where's it heavy? Hold on, I dropped my card earlier.
It's I got it right in front of me. It's while a friendly squadron without rogue is attacking.
Yeah.
So, I tend to notice, like you mentioned, when you're flying generics, you're bringing Sloane. When you're flying all your rogue and your aces, you're bringing Thrawn. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Admiral Sloane. I think the one video where I finally broke your winning streak there, I was running Sloane, wasn't I?
I believe so.
Yeah, so yet another reason that she's gone pretty high up on my list. Although with due course, and at 24 points, investment.
Yeah. To note, if you didn't have Sloane, you would not have won that game.
That is true.
Because you spent defense tokens that I needed to stay alive, and you also spent my what's the token called? Salvo token.
Yeah, salvo
and if
token.
because I only needed 1 damage to table you.
Right.
If I got that salvo off, I would have killed you.
So again, prime reason why she jumped up to the top of my list. Hey, I get to beat John when I play with Sloane. Maybe I'll play Sloane more often, just to.
You could. You can face it against my Sloane list.
That could be interesting. We'll strip each other's defense tokens off at the same time.
I don't have defense tokens. I run generics.
Well, I'm talking about the ships.
You'd have to get through my my squadrons first.
All 50 of them that are sitting there on the board. So.
Yeah. Okay, so that is our admirals for the Empire ranked. Our least favorite to build to our most favorite to build. So, hope you enjoyed this quick discussion. If you did, comment. Let us know what your favorite commander is, or if you disagree with something that we say here, let us know. We'll talk to you in the comments. So, thank you for watching. I'm John.
And I'm Ken.
And you've been watching Ion Radio.